Go ahead, Frank. Oh, good morning, everyone. This is State Treasurer Dale Falwell joining you from North Carolina. We want to welcome all those that are participating today to our Ask Me Anything. So this echo needs to.
That's okay.
Hope all you can hear me okay. Uh, just want to go over before we go to questions a few items that were pointed out in the press release. One is that the successful overriding of House Bill 750 regarding ESG and as it relates to the government, the state pension plan. Secondly, some items dealing with uh, our continued attempts to try to get medical transparency and protect the consumers of North Carolina uh, through legislation that has passed the House nearly unanimously, but still sitting in the Senate. We have some preliminary numbers in on our retirement division for the fiscal year that just ended on June 30th. And lastly, a press release that went out yesterday regarding my endorsement of the extension in full support of the extension of the eligibility to build the MVP Southgate project. And that letter that we sent was going to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. So with that, I know we have lots of people on the call, so we're going to start with Teresa Opeka from Apaka, excuse me, from Caroline Journal.
Okay. You had it right first, Treasurer. It's Opeka, but thank you. Um, two questions. So
Volume.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I was saying that on our end. Thank you.
Okay. Um, First question, there was a recent article about Medicaid expansion in the state. Just wanted to get your thoughts about that. Second question, about a glass plant closing in Wilson, as opposed to what's going on with the Bud Light controversy. So a little more general terms about wokeness hurting people, in the end, people, hardworking people in North Carolina being hurt by the woke agenda. What are your thoughts on that as well?
Thank you for those questions. Let's start with the first question about Medicaid expansion. I've said this yesterday, I'll say it today, and I'll say it tomorrow that the problem with healthcare in North Carolina is not a revenue problem, it's a cost problem. When you look at the United States Institute of Medicine, it talks about the tremendous amount of fraud, waste, and abuse that exists in our public health system. And I've also said publicly to you and others in the past that I was disappointed that Medicaid expansion did not do more to actually lower the cost of health care. When you lower the cost of health care, you make it more available to people and more accessible. Uh, and secondly, I'm concerned, as you are alluding to in this article, that Medicaid expansion will increase the cost of the operating the state health plan and could ultimately have an impact on not only its operating budgets from a year-to-year basis, but also have an impact on our gigantic unfunded healthcare liability. So I have not changed. And on top of that, we can also talk about uh, um, certificate of need reform. I was on the SHIC call yesterday as a guest. If any member of the press who's really interested in CON needs to, and you probably already do this, Teresa, needs to get on the schedule of actually zooming in on these calls where you hear these Teresa, these horror stories across the state of North Carolina of people who are trying to get MRI machines approved in areas where people have to drive 100 miles to get an MRI done. Uh, this is really impacting people's lives. And so I am saying that I'm concerned about Medicaid expansions, uh, financial, uh, negative financial impact on the state health plan, not only in its yearly operating budgets, but its long-term solvency. I'm deeply concerned that there wasn't enough work done to actually lower the cost of health care. And I'm concerned about the fact that Medicaid expansion didn't go far enough or fast enough in terms of repealing certificate of need, which I think South Carolina and many other states are going that at a very fast pace. On the other issue about the Wilson bottling plant, I'm saddened to hear of that news. I don't consume alcohol, but I am the keeper of the public purse and realize the importance that Wilson and other communities across our state, the importance that they have in employing people and being taxpayers in our community. I hope that there will be a very rapid attempt, Teresa, to deal with that issue. And when you use the word woke, this also relates back to the ESG stuff. I'm looking at pensions and investment. Just ironically, Teresa happens to be sitting on my desk right here. I'll just kind of hold it up here for a moment. And in the latest edition of Pension and Investments, it talks about Vanguard surpassing BlackRock as the #1 money manager in the world. And I think a lot of that had to do with these ESG policies. So it doesn't matter how it impacts, whether it's the politicization of our pension money or the closing of a bottling plant. These are issues that I think are very concerning, especially as some of these rural communities are trying to, they barely got out of the recession after we were attacked on 9/11. They barely got out of the recession associated with the great financial crisis. They're trying to climb out of post-COVID, and now we have news like this. Is just the last thing that the city of Wilson or any city needs to hear.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Follow up, Teresa?
Nope, that was it. Thank you so much, Treasurer.
Thank you. Right. Our next, Chip Barnett from Bond Buyer.
Hi, I was going to ask you about the ESG, the model and how the pension funds is going to fare without doing all this ESG stuff.
Repeat that a little louder, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you just a little bit more about the ESG policy, and what do you think Washington might wind up doing? Do you think they will get involved with the states at all?
Well, I will say this factually and sarcastically. I have zero confidence that Washington, D.C. can do anything on any topic at any time. So let me just start there. Secondly, I think that that the citizens of this country are looking to the states. Look to the states to actually try to resolve some of these issues. And Chip, in our press release that went out in December, we were very clear. Unlike what some other state treasurers were doing, we have had a long-term relationship with BlackRock. We have worked tirelessly to negotiate our fees down to the lowest possible levels. And so we did 3 things in December. One is that we secured the lowering of all these fees. And the reason that should be important to your readers and consumers of your product is that is our job. When we put our left hand on the Bible and raise our right hand, it is to exercise a loyalty and a duty of care to those that teach, protect, and serve, and taxpayers like them. When you're actually doing your job in terms of the investment management division, you're trying to get the highest return for the lowest cost with the biggest margin of safety. And so what we put out in December regarding ESG, Chip, has to do with negotiating our fees down to the lowest possible rates, B, pulling all of our proxies out of New York, from Larry Fink and BlackRock, so they can no longer politicize our assets. And C, I asked for Larry Fink to be removed from his position. And the reason that I did that is that we own BlackRock Management Company inside of our index. We do not pick and choose which stocks are in our index. And all of you who are on this call who have your own 401k and retirement plan, you own index funds. You don't get to choose which stocks are in those indices either. We don't get to do that either. So we own BlackRock stock, the management company, and that stock has fallen dramatically over a period of time because they're losing assets. The way that you value an asset management company is you value it based on the assets under management. And when we see large pension plans like Texas Retirement, who, because of ESG policies and other things, took their money away from BlackRock, we think that we led on this issue. We get calls from other states who are asking us why we did it the way we did it and what exactly that we did. And so, to be clear, Chip, we've never had any ESG policies at the Treasurer's Office. That was true yesterday. That was true today. That was true tomorrow. But we did partner with the General Assembly to get an ESG policies in place that will not only impact my administration, but future treasurers going forward.
Thank you very much.
Jordan or Amanda from Bloomberg News.
Yeah, Amanda couldn't make it today, but thank you. I was wondering how the ESG law is actually going to be implemented. Are you going to retroactively take things out of the portfolios? Is it only going to affect future investments? Just really any concrete logistical information would be really helpful.
Well, Jordan, that's a great question because ultimately it's not the law that gets written, it's the people who are responsible for operationalizing it, right? And so you've asked a great question. We have never had any ESG policies at the Treasurer's Office. That is true yesterday, that's true today, and that's also true tomorrow. We continue to operationalize this by making sure that all of our proxies that we have removed from BlackRock from New York back to Raleigh, North Carolina, are being voted in a conservative, common sense way that reflects our citizens. That's the second thing that we're in the process of doing. But we're always looking at issues regarding ESG and ESG policies to make sure that we're not tangentially involved in some other type of ESG models. And I will say this, Jordan, it's not in your question, but I also look at ESG through my eyes, not just as the sole fiduciary of one of the largest pools of public money in the world, but also look through it through my eyes as the chair of the State Banking Commission, as I see that these ESG policies are permeating itself into the tiering and the underwriting of bank loans. And I'm also looking through these ESG policies in terms of my role as the chair of the Local Government Commission, which has been in existence in North Carolina for 75 years. It's for most of that period of time, it was very unique to North Carolina. But in terms of how Standard & Poor's and Moody's and Fitch are actually asking questions of many of our applicants to our local government who are trying to issue bonds for public education, public safety, public works, and public roads, and how these ESG policies are maybe impacting their quote credit score, their bond rating, and which the effect of that would be to raise interest rates on some of these rural parts of North Carolina that are A, depopulating, B, themselves are trying to recover from our economy being shut down during COVID, C, having, in some respects, difficulty because they're depopulating of how to provide the increased cost of essential services without raising taxes, especially on the lower and fixed income people of their community, and struggling in some respects to make their pension payments on behalf of their public service workers, their health care payments on behalf of their public service workers. uh, and other types and, keeping their water and sewer systems solvent. So that was a very long answer, Jordan, to your question, but I'm just trying to give you the mosaic of how all this stuff fits together.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Jordan, I will say, and you've heard this before, when you've seen one treasurer's office in the United States, you've seen one treasurer's office. They're all very unique. And a lot of these reports that you hear about people exiting or out of these certain money management firms, a lot of people who possibly say these things have no direct involvement in their retirement systems. They just say them. But in our case, that is not the situation in North Carolina. Okay. Our next is Courtney with pensions and investments. Hey, Courtney.
Hi, thanks for speaking with me. My first question is just related to the press release that you sent out yesterday. You mentioned that, as part of your anti-ESG campaign, that you're assuming control of the state's proxy votes rather than allowing BlackRock to vote those shares. So is that a new move that you're referring to, or were you just referring to those or that agreement that you did back in December?
I'm referring to going back to Jordan's question. I'm referring to how we have been and continue to be in the process of operationalizing exactly what we said we were going to do in December. And when we said that, as you can just visualize, we were sort of on the front end of the kickoff of this game. The proxy voting game is not something that happens. It does happen all year, but there's a concentrated time. So we wanted to get through that period of time when most of the proxies come out after the annual reports come out at the end of the year. And then now we're fine tuning that entire process to operationalize what we said we were going to do in December.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then I just had another question for you. I was wondering if you could share what your thoughts are on BlackRock's Larry Fink saying that he no longer uses the term ESG because it's been politically weaponized.
I will say two things about that. One relates to a former resident of my hometown, Winston-Salem, Maya Angelou, who said many years ago, when a person shows you who they are the first time, you should believe them. Larry Fink is the father of this entire topic. So if he is somehow concerned about what it is that he was the father of being sort of mischaracterized, then my second comment to you is biblical. And it's funny how God made our hand, that anytime you point a finger at someone, there's three more pointing it back at you. And as it pertains to your particular question, the three fingers that are pointing back are pointing directly back to Larry Fink, who has started this and was one of the instigators of this whole movement, several years ago, and was basically betting, the world's largest money management firm on this theory. Now, let me also say that let's talk about environmental social governance. Environmental. So most of you have seen this. I suggest, unless you're really dying of thirst, you not drink out of this. But this is a plastic bottle that I fill up twice a day. And the reason that I fill this bottle up is that I hate using plastic bottles, that it will end up in a landfill or an ocean somewhere. So I think that these words, environmental, what's an environmentalist? What's a conservationist? The fact is that what I am is I'm a conservative. And the root word of conservative is to conserve. And that's why I fill this bottle up, which used to be an orange juice bottle, as you can tell, with water from our water fountain. So I don't think that people who are against ESG are not necessarily not environmental or conservationist. Social and then governance. I mean, we deal with the governance issues all the time. what the issues facing North Carolinians right now, in my opinion, that could pertain to the three letters ESG are: one, energy independence. And I put out a press release yesterday about the extension of a pipeline into North Carolina. Energy independence, safe streets and neighborhoods, and good government. That's what I think that is on the minds of the ESG. Uh, uh, I think that's what those words should stand for, and what's on the minds of North Carolinians. Lastly, is that Larry Fink still works at BlackRock. His salary went down 35%. He still makes $25 million, and it doesn't matter where you're calling in from today. You can still buy a few good steaks on $25 million a year in salary. But I will say that if you look at how people have voted with their feet, the fact is, I think Larry Fink has said what he said because he is no longer the largest money manager in the world, according to Pensions and Investments, that Vanguard is. So all of a sudden, this thing that he thought was going to be a way of actually gathering more assets and becoming larger and more powerful, that didn't work out the way he wanted. So now all of a sudden, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. But as I will repeat what Maya Angelou said, that when a person shows you who they are the first time, you should believe them. He is the father of BlackRock. He is the father of ESG policies that have permeated the discussions across this country, both in the investment management division, in the banking system, as well as the local governments and their credit score or bond ratings as it relates to borrowing money on a tax-free basis. Follow up, Courtney?
Nope, that was it. Thank you so much.
Got two more. Travis Fain.
Yeah, good morning. I have what I guess would be a more serious question to ask, but I got to start by asking, what's that in your hands?
It's something that somebody brought in here from Sunset Beach. It's just sitting here on the desk. And as I'm thinking about what I'm going to say to this great panel of people asking me questions, it helps keep me focused.
Fair enough.
Would you like one?
I'm not sure, honestly.
That's a great answer, Travis.
On the ESG bill is why a law was needed, why that couldn't be handled by you as treasurer, by the board, why it could not be an issue put before voters in the next treasurer's election. Maybe people want this, maybe they don't. Why do we need a law tying your hands or the next treasurer's hands?
Well, what I've said publicly, Travis, is that you don't always need a law to do what's right and what's wrong. And so therefore we did not have ESG policies here. That was true yesterday, that's true today, and that'll be true tomorrow, whether this law came in existence or not. But there are legislators who have studied this issue and worked on this issue, and we're grateful for their partnering with us to find out, going back to one of the earlier questions, it's not just the law that passed, but how do you actually operationalize it? So I guess my direct answer to your question, Travis, is that, and I've said this to you through our entire relationship, what Governor Martin continues to say, doing right's rarely wrong. And not having ESG policies in the last 7 years, that was right. We also don't have SPACs. We don't have cryptocurrency. We don't have Bitcoin. There's a lot of things that through the investment management division and myself as the sole fiduciary, we just decided not to do. I think at the end of the day, Travis, when all is said and done about ESG, and when you actually look at, for example, in one of these ESG indexes, which you may or could possibly own inside your own personal retirement account, that Tesla was removed from the index and an oil company was put in the index. I'm not sure, based on what Larry Fink and others have described as ESG, I'm not sure how that matches. I think at the end of the day that these ESG investments will have shown to be poor performers that charge higher fees. And we have the responsibility of getting the best performance for the lowest fees.
Yeah, I don't understand why you need the law, though. I mean, if it's that easy a decision, why does the law need to exist to tell people to do it? And then you keep saying there are no ESG policies, but we just passed a law. Can you explain to me why you're saying there's no ESG policy tomorrow when a policy has been passed into law?
It's just something I've always said. And, you know, you need to talk to the bill sponsors about why they introduced the law. We worked, they wanted, I don't speak for the legislature on any matter. But once they decided, certain bill sponsors that they wanted to file a piece of legislation, especially given, Travis, that there were so many quote pieces of model legislation that were flying all over the United States on this particular topic. And you know, they got focused, we got focused and worked together and said, this is how this relates to North Carolina's money. And that what you see is the product of that.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn Bonner.
Thank you, Treasurer. If I could follow up on Travis's question, if it doesn't sound like your policies are going to change as a result of the law, is that right? I mean, you're still going to keep the investments with BlackRock. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
And
So if the policies
but that decision was made in December.
if the policies in your office are not going to change, then why was a law needed?
Yeah, you need to ask the bill sponsors about that. Our job, once they decided that they were going to pass a law, our job was to partner with them to make sure the law was written in a way that we could operationalize it.
Okay. Can I follow up with another question on a different topic? Senate Bill 299.
Yes, and title?
Yes, this was about the late audits and the penalties to municipalities who file late.
It's not a penalty, so I'm not accepting the premise of that, but I'll be glad to talk about that particular piece of legislation if you like.
How would you describe it?
I would describe it as a way for the taxpayers of those communities, especially the lower and fixed income taxpayers, to have a way after repeated year after year after year offenses of not knowing where their money was or if it was being reconciled. And as an incentive that after you go year after year after year, that we are able to, this sales tax money will go toward getting an audit that the local elected officials had the responsibility to get anyway. If this had been in place, I would dare say that the $500,000 embezzlement that occurred, and the state auditor would probably confirm this, Lynn, if you were to call her, this $500,000 embezzlement out of the little community of Spring Lake would not have occurred because Spring Lake was year after year after year behind on their audit. East Laurinburg, which just got dechartered, they were perpetually late for 10 years. And I want to be very clear about this. Our hope is that this law would never, ever need to be used because that would mean the counties, the water and sewer districts, or the cities that are taking all this taxpayer money in, which is now on steroids because of the federal money that's coming into these communities, that we would never have to use it because that would mean the local elected officials were doing their job to make sure the books were balanced, the books were reconciled, and an outside firm had looked at that and said, thumbs up, everything's in line.
If I could follow up, a couple of years ago, I reported on some late audits, and I know that both you and Beth Wood are frustrated by late audits, but part of the story was about a company that was filing late, and the municipalities were dogging them, saying, please file these audits, they're late. And it was several communities, and your office knew about it. So why should the communities, have their sales revenues docked if it's really the fault of an audit firm that's not doing its job?
I think that there are provisions in that particular piece of legislation that deal with exactly with what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and you're right. And it's, I and the state auditor, and I think other members of the local government commission, not just her, she and I, are frustrated about this because we see the enormous amounts of millions and billions of dollars that are collectively coming into these communities, and for things not to be balanced, not to be reconciled, and not to be audited. And then we even had situations where we have city local governments who say our books have been reconciled when the state auditor said, when the auditing firm says, no, they have not been reconciled. So there's 1,300 entities that report to the local government commission. Very briefly, that's 100 counties, 549 cities, water and sewer districts, airport authorities, universities, and hospitals, and probably a couple of others I missed out on. So, there's only 38 people that work at the local government commission. And we're having to make some really tough decisions about what's happening on these audits. And I'm the treasurer. I take responsibility for dechartering East Laurinburg, and all the other things that I've ever said as the chair of the local government commission. But a lot of these things had been going on for a very long period of time, where people did not have their audits in, and the local taxpayers had no idea of where their money was going and if it was even going for essential services. And I would say in the case of Spring Lake, when we have nearly $500,000 that have been embezzled from that town, which, by the way, it's the second time in 10 years that we've had to save Spring Lake from drowning. Second time in 10 years. And that, 154,000 of that $500,000 was going to a nursing home, where I have a canceled check of showing the money going from the city bank account to a nursing home for the benefit of the embezzler's mother, and put her mother's name on the memo line. This is not political or emotional. This is actually mathematical and factual about how these audits could have prevented the taxpayers, many low and fixed income taxpayers of Spring Lake, from being harmed and damaged.
Some of the municipalities that have late audits are very, very small. And some do not have the financial expertise on hand and can't afford it. So if you are diverting some of their sales tax revenue to making sure audits are complete, aren't you also hurting the same fixed income people who rely on local services?
Well, I completely disagree with the premise of that also, because a lot of these local governments are spending money they don't have. They're asking to borrow money, possibly for things when they don't have the ability to pay it back. And, we're talking about over the long-term situation that we have here. So it's never, ever our intent to do anything. It's always our intent to exalt especially lower and fixed income people of these communities, because not knowing them all individually, I would say that if there are three possible tax burdens: sales tax, income tax, and property taxes, especially for the elderly, the property taxes are that money going into their city and county for these essential services is probably the biggest part of their tax burden. And this also has, in some respects, Lynn, if you want to follow the logic here, it has to do with something that I've always been interested in, and that is to try to keep elderly people in their homes as absolutely as long as we can. And one part of that is the affordability of staying there based on what it just costs to pay property taxes and fire insurance and to heat their home and light their home. So there's a whole long-term aspect of this, but the intent is to actually is to advocate for the invisible, these individuals that you just mentioned to me, is to advocate for them on their behalf to make sure that this hard-earned, especially fixed income money that's going into these the to the coffers of these cities and counties are properly balanced, properly reconciled, and properly audited.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah. I'll close by thanking you all for joining us. We do this every month, and we appreciate those that have called in internationally and nationally on some of these larger topics today. And for those of you who have just joined us for the first time, we sometimes we get questions about ESG, and sometimes we get questions about, is the dredging at the Outer Banks in Dare County really working? So the range of questions that we can get on these calls, we don't know who's going to be calling in or what the questions are going to be, but I want to thank staff for making this jump up on the table, and I want to thank all of you for making the choice to join us today. And if you have any further follow-up questions about anything I said or how I said it, just reach out to our communications department. We'd be glad to generally stop what we're doing to help you out.
Mr. Treasurer, I apologize. I have one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I meant to ask about this. Do you have an opinion on NC Innovation, the $1.4 billion proposal in the Senate budget?
I was not asked and have not been asked about the NC Innovation. I can tell you that the part of state government that has the best, most transparent track record for putting money like that to work is the private equity investment management division that sits here in the Treasurer's office. We have billions and billions of dollars of not just real estate investments, but of alternative investments and private equity investments that focuses on this issue, on this topic. I have seen outlets like yours, Travis, report on what the rates of returns are going to be. Those rates of returns are 30% higher than our assumed rate of return for our entire pension plan. If I've seen you report properly that they're looking at 9% rate of return, our pension plan's assumed rate of return is 6.5%. And so I'm sure that this is a topic that's going to be studied more as we move forward. But I also know that we have subject matter experts, both here in the Treasurer's office and actually some at North Carolina State, who are duly qualified to deal in some of these private market angel slash venture capital investments. We do have a venture capital multiplier fund that the previous treasurer put into place that sits inside of the NC Cash, the Escheats division of the Treasurer's office. And if you would like for us to produce to you, Travis, the origination, the year that fund originated, how much the tens of millions that were committed initially to that fund, how much of that money has actually been drawn down, and how it's performed, we'd be glad to do that because this is something that was mandated by the General Assembly before I became the treasurer.
All right, thank you.
Have you heard of that fund before?
I have, and I have some information on it. I don't know that I have its rate of return.
Yeah, it's a venture. I got so many funds in my head. The Venture Capital Multiplier Fund, I believe, is the one that I'm referring to. But if you'll just you know, a one sentence to the communications team, and we'll get that information for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we appreciate all you joining us, and hope you have a blessed day and a safe and happy summer.